So we made it through the holidays without a terrorist attack, but it doesn't mean we can ever let our guard down because our enemies are persistent and they're patient. Could the hundreds of mosques in America be fronts for terror training? Last week when I was sitting in for Bill O'Reilly, I posed that question to Frank Gaffney, founder and president of the Center for Security Policy.
A mosque that is used to promote a seditious program, which is what Shariah is, as practiced by Faisal Rauf, as practiced by Osama bin Laden, as practiced by the Saudis and the Iranians and so many others, that is not a protected religious practice. That is, in fact, sedition. And I think that we have to be clear about that and treat it accordingly.
Well, the man who warns of stealth jihad and points to the Ground Zero Mosque is with us tonight. Frank, good to see you again, my friend. So we got a lot of heat, you and I. You and I got a lot of heat from the left-leaning or left-wing blogs saying, boy, these two Islamophobes, racists, et cetera, yada, yada, yada. We'll get to a couple of them later. But what did you mean? Just clarify what you mean. I think I had asked you, do you mean every mosque could be a front for a terror activity cell?
Yeah, and the answer is still no, not every mosque, but unfortunately the vast majority of them, it appears, have in fact received funding from a Muslim Brotherhood front known as the North American Islamic Trust, much of it coming from Saudi Arabia, and with that comes the program of the Saudis and in fact of the Muslim Brotherhood itself, namely promoting Sharia, its triumph worldwide, including in this country, under what they aspire to have be a global world leader, a caliph. And this sounds crazy, except it's quite consistent with what we know about the Muslim Brotherhood's mission, which is to destroy Western civilization from within by its own miserable hand. It is consistent with its training, with its doctrine, with its practice.
So, Frank, is that what you're talking about when you say stealth jihad, destroy Western civilization within, by its own, what'd you call it, what kind of hand?
Sharia. Its own miserable hand. Those aren't my words. Those are the Muslim Brotherhood. But, Eric, here's the point. We often focus on, and I think this is where we started on Bill's show the other night, with the idea that the problem we've got is violent jihad. And that is, to be sure, a problem. And it reinforces this other component. But for too long, and this is what's particularly worrying about many of these mosques, it's worrying about other institutions, the Muslim Brotherhood front organizations with whom the United States government is incessantly outreaching, and not least, specifically of interest perhaps to your audience, it's consistent with the practice of Sharia-compliant finance.
Right. Okay, hang on there,
which is an engine for stealth jihad.
Very important, Frank. Stay with us. Go ahead, Bob. I mean, you've been listening to
Frank.
You've been. You know,
I know Frank, and even though we don't agree politically, I've always thought him to be a serious man and with serious ideas. Frank, what you're saying here, though, is way over the line. Let me tell you why. Every mosque in this country, since 9/11, its finances have been investigated. And because they've been investigated, some of them have been shut down, as you know, and there's been arrests that have been made, as you also know. To make a statement that a majority of these people have received money from the Brotherhood and are practicing Sharia law is simply an overstatement beyond even, I mean, it's not like you, Frank. I don't understand it. I mean, you really cannot support that statement.
Well, as I did the other night, let me just hold up the book. This is a book that we've published recently with senior national security practitioners. Bob, I strongly recommend that you read it. It is a matter of fact. It was introduced into evidence in the Holy Land Foundation trial that the North American Islamic Trust is used to hold the mortgages of many of the mosques in this country.
But you said, Frank,
if some of them have been closed down, that's news to me.
You said a majority
I think it's 80%.
of those, and as you know, there have been a number of actions taken against these mosques that take that kind of money. And the fact of the matter is, well over half of them have not been found to be taking this money. So why do you make a blanket statement like that?
Well, with the greatest of respect, you don't know what you're talking about.
The
truth of the matter is, this organization, the North American Islamic Trust, is identified by the United States government as a Muslim Brotherhood front. It has been used as a pass-through for funding from Saudi Arabia for the purposes of purchasing the mortgages of mosques. And with that come the imams, with that come the pedagogy, with that come the textbooks, the videos, and so on, all of which have as their purpose promoting Sharia within America. And the fact that you think it's not a problem is evidence of the success.
I didn't say that.
Guys, hold on. I want to bring in the rest of the panel in here. Go ahead, Bo.
You know, I've been to the Middle East 24 times. I'm a little familiar with this, and what he says is very true. A lot of funding comes through the radical side from Saudi Arabia, and what he's saying is very true. Also, you know, what we're talking about is Muslim and Sharia law. Sharia law, where you could marry a 6-year-old girl, where you could have sexual encounters with a girl 8 years old. These are laws that they're trying to institute through these laws.
Let me get my lawyer. Go ahead.
What's somewhat comforting, practicing here in New York in the Southern District, where all the federal resources are. You know, Eric, over the last 10 years, all the resources that went to organized crime really have been shifted over to terrorism and on these exact topics. I agree with Bob. There are heavy investigations going into each one of these mosques, especially these metropolitan areas, about where the funding's coming from and what's going on. I mean, what Frank is saying is actually terrifying. When you talk about terrorism, Frank, it's terrifying. But we have the best people
Frank,
on it.
If it were 80% of the mosques, or is it 80% of the money coming from a certain area that you question? What's the answer? I mean, what are you suggesting we shut down 80% of the mosques in America?
Well, this is precisely the point that we got to with Eric on O'Reilly's show the other night. The answer, I believe, is where you find mosques that are engaged in promoting Sharia, and it's not all of them. There are other mosques in which Muslims are practicing their faith in a peaceful, tolerant way. They don't want to live under this barbaric, totalitarian, supremacist program any more than the rest of us do. Those are not the problem. The ones that are, and these other front organizations, the Islamic Society of North America, the Council on American Islamic Relations, the International Islamic Institute of Trust.
Where you find it. When they find it, they prosecute. Where you find
Sharia, you need to shut it down. The United States government.
Sorry, guys.
The problem, Bob, is the U.S. government is not looking for it, and it certainly is not going to shut it down.
Frank, we're going to say thank you to you. Beckel has a big meeting. He maybe promised he'd have to get out of here. We're going to say thank you very much. I have a hunch, Frank, you and I and the rest of the panel are going to show up on some more of the blogs. Coming up, the corruption matrix. Corruption at the border of crooked.